we have an official debate happening. We have Jiva, we have CoolDog for this debate. Jiva's taken the position that it's nonsensical to believe in both idealism and evolution. CoolDog's taking the opposition. When we based upon who concedes, we don't get a vocal concession from either participant. We'll put it to a voting poll in which the audience could vote on who they think performed better overall in the debate. I guess we'll go with an hour time limit with no moderation. And if that's cool with you guys, we can get started.
Right, thank you. So I guess I'll just start by laying out my position.
Yeah,
CoolDog, is
yeah,
that okay?
sounds great.
Yeah, thanks. So basically, as we've agreed, in this context, evolution, we're referring to common descent, i.e., the claim that all organisms and all species are biologically and naturalistically descended from a single-cell common ancestor, like a bacterium. And for idealism, we're referring to ontological or metaphysical idealism. So I guess I'll start with a quote from Karl Popper, who said, Darwinism is not a testable scientific theory, but a metaphysical research program. Now, what he meant by this, I believe, is that there is a metaphysical grounding for evolutionary theory. And this metaphysical grounding, in my opinion, is naturalism or naturalistic philosophy. You could even say it's physicalism, right? And it's my view that you simply can't get evolution without this grounding. It's the metaphysical grounding on which the theory is founded, right? So, obviously, idealism, it's the opposite of this. It says that mental stuff is the cause of the universe and subsequently the cause of all organisms and all species, and this mental stuff cannot be reduced to matter. So, idealism is incompatible with naturalism, ergo, it's incompatible with evolution. Right. For this debate, obviously, I'll accept that evolution is the best naturalistic explanation for biodiversity. So if you're a naturalist, like most non-theistic evolutionary biologists seem to be, it's consistent for you to subscribe to and believe in evolution because the naturalist says everything comes about through naturalistic processes. But if you're an idealist, it makes no sense because your position automatically rejects naturalism or physicalism and says there are some phenomena which arise through non-naturalistic means. Therefore, you've got no grounds to assert that all life must come about through naturalistic means. So I guess I'll leave it there and let you respond, and then we can get into the details of the argument.
Yeah, sure. So, I guess I need some like farther background on what the view is specifically. Are you a physicalist?
No, I'm not a physicalist.
You're
I'm
not
just
a
I'm just arguing that the two positions are incompatible.
Okay. So, are you saying that if I believe in evolution, I have to be a physicalist?
Yes, it
And if
logically
I'm a physicalist, then the best explanation is going to be evolution, right?
correct.
So what is the physicalism they're doing? One second, let me write this down. Physicalism, if and only if evolution. So, what is the material stuff they're doing in the theory of evolution? Like, why do we? What is the need for this metaphysical entity of material stuff?
Right, because the claim is that all mental stuff comes from physical stuff. That's
Okay, good.
yeah.
All mental stuff comes from physical stuff.
Yeah, it
Have
can
you
be
ever
reduced to matter.
interacted? Have you ever interacted with anything physical directly?
Myself?
Yeah.
What do you mean by that exactly?
I mean, have you ever had an experience that is not mental in nature?
No.
No. So you've had no direct experience of physical stuff, right?
Yeah.
We grant that entity because we could assume physicalism, right? We're also committed to the position that bits of like certain things can coalesce in a way that emergent properties happen, correct?
What do you mean by that?
So, like the physical stuff, the physical neurons firing in your brain under physicalism make the emergent property of mind, right?
No, I don't think
No.
physicalism allows for that.
Okay, so how do we have mental experiences in physical with how do we have mental experiences from physical stuff?
Well, that's a hard problem of consciousness, isn't it? So that they would argue, the physicalists would argue that there's just brain, right? And from brain, consciousness emerges or mind
Right.
emerges. Now,
Yeah, that makes sense.
many physicalists are hard determinists. They will say that the mind and consciousness are just secondary inconsequential byproducts.
Yeah, sure.
Everything is actually just a physical process, and everything can be reduced to a physical
Yeah,
process.
that's fine. That's fine. I was asking specifically about like that thing that consciousness then emerges, right?
Yes,
Have this,
emergent property.
right? It's an emergent property, right, of this collection of physical entities, right?
Correct.
That we never have direct access to, right?
Correct.
So my point is, why not just have the same exact process that you're doing here, right? But
Mhm.
just change it to mental stuff. I mean, it seems much more metaphysically clean to say that, hey, we experience things through mental stuff. That's the only thing we experience is the mental stuff. We
Mhm.
never have contact with the physical stuff. So why not just assume everything is mental stuff? And it
Fine,
follows
but
the
then
exact same rules as your physical stuff. It's just mental instead.
right, okay, but by mental stuff, we're referring to consciousness and minds, right?
No, we're just referring to a mental substance. We don't we don't necessarily have to fiat that there's a mind there to perceive this stuff. It's just that it's mental stuff instead of physical stuff.
So what you were saying then is mental stuff precedes physical stuff.
Well, there's no
It's a
physical
cause.
stuff on my view. It's just mental all the
Ri
way down.
right, okay, but okay, so what, for example, what would have existed before abiogenesis, before the first organism came into existence?
I mean, it would just be uncategorized mental stuff.
Right, with no perceiver there to perceive
Correct.
it.
I don't require a perceiver.
Right, okay, but is that not then referencing a sort of cosmic mind, aka God?
It could, but I'm not like committed to that at all. I mean, I think the collection as a whole, we could say, is like when you collect all the mental stuff together, that whole, that oneness there is what there's will there, and then there's like that's like your cosmic mind or whatever. It's just a whole collection. I mean,
Yeah,
we
because
already
otherwise
allowed
you're
for emergent properties, right? I'm allowing for emergent properties too, right? One of the collections, the emergent properties of this vast collection of mental stuff is the universe, right? And stuff like that, right? I don't need necessarily a cosmic mind, although that would be helpful.
well, if you don't have a cosmic mind, then I think it's just we're just into semantics, aren't we? Because you would say it's mental stuff, but the maybe the quantum physicists would say, well, it's just that's just a metaphysical grounding, right? Or that's just a metaphysical prime mover, but they wouldn't necessarily refer to it as mental stuff. I'm of the opinion that idealism really presupposes a sort of a mind, an actual mind, whether that be a cosmic mind, objective
Yeah, and like what
idealism.
you're talking about mind or whatever is just an emergent property of the entire set.
Yes.
So I'm gonna say things like we're all one at the end of the day.
Yes.
So from that perspective, it's not that we need like an individual distinct entity, right? From the perspective of the whole, there is no principle of differentiation. So there just isness, and it's just the mental stuff, right? There's
Mhm.
no at the end of the day, in my metaphysical view, there's no real fundamental distinction between you and me. We're all just
Yep.
the flux of the mental stuff.
Yep. Okay.
So it's not like Berkeley. This is more German idealism.
Yeah, you're going more with sort of transcendental idealism
Yes,
here.
correct.
You're right.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. It's not like Berkeley. I accept that, but still, are you arguing then that there is the ultimate reality is this transcendental mind or consciousness, and from that, so-called physical matter arises, the organisms arise, like
Well,
abiogenesis.
I mean, like the objects that you would call physical arise from that.
Yes. Okay.
Correct.
And
That you
then
would call physical.
okay, and then from those organisms, an individual mind arises.
No.
Okay.
Metaphysically, there is no individual mind. It's just a mind.
Okay, yep, so we all share the same mind.
We all share the same mind.
Right, okay.
But I mean, in the different configurations of mental stuff and through different like our own will or will itself, like, pops up these different manifestations. So we're different manifestations of the same fundamental thing.
Right. Okay. But how does that interact with the physical body then of an individual?
Well, these are also just like from the flux of the mind, you get these different types of representations, and they change over time and so forth.
Right. Okay. So could you explain to me, let's say, for example, an organism is born through reproduction, like you have a child. How exactly is that mind emerging in that child under this worldview that you're presenting?
Well, it's not like it emerges in this like I mean it's just a new blip sort of in the flux of representation, right? We're just, based upon our consciousness or whatever,
Mhm,
right? We're just demarcating that as this and as not these other things, right?
mhm,
There's no like the biological story is more of a metaphor for how we come to call and differentiate different things. Even though at very fundamental base level, there isn't really that harsh of a distinction between the child and me or the child and mother, right? But it's just
yeah.
like these are just different things that we use to demarcate child from mother, for example. That makes sense.
Okay, but it's not. Therefore, the child's mind is not um, dependent on their physical brain, or shall we say, related to their physical brain in any meaningful sense.
I mean, insofar as it changes the way that the representation of them presents itself to us, like if I smash your head in, sorry for the violence, if I
No,
smash
that's
your
okay.
head with a sledgehammer, right, that's going to change the representation that you are. You're no longer animated, right? You no
Hmm.
longer have this representation of being moving, of having life, and so forth, right?
Hmm.
But nothing has like, sorry, my alarm just went off.
That's right.
That's hilarious. But but yeah, it's just changing representations. It's not that the physical mind, the physical brain, as you call it, is not really different than anything else. Now
Hmm.
we say that the brain is that which produces conscious experience, but that's more of a metaphor. It's not like an actual, like it's not like physically causal in that way. But I still have
Hmm.
causation. It's just mentally
Okay, so let me just try a different tack then. So, okay, so for example, the physicalist or the naturalist, right, will claim that there are no supernatural phenomena in the universe. Everything is naturalistic.
sure,
Everything can be reduced to matter. Everything can be explained through physical processes, right?
sure,
Yeah. So from that metaphysical starting point, right, they can formulate naturalistic models for the fundamental questions of life, like the origin of the cosmos, the origin of the first
sure.
species, first organism, which is abiogenesis, and then the origin of all species, right? Now they need so they in my opinion they need naturalism to formulate these views, right? But you as an idealist are presupposing supernaturalism, right? Because this mental stuff is supernaturalistic. It's not reduced to matter. It can't be explained
I
through
mean, like,
naturalism.
yes and no. So, like, when you use the term naturalism, it just means something different within my system. Like,
Mhm,
the referent just changes from physical stuff to mental stuff. The rules of mental stuff are exactly the same as your rules for physical stuff are, in terms of like the movement of bodies and so forth. But they're just rules of mind instead of rules of matter. It's the only difference.
yeah, but the point is then, how can you assert that the rules of mind are the same as the rules of physical stuff?
Well,
Where
I
does
mean,
that
okay, like the reason why I'm persuaded to be an idealist is because even to formulate a rule itself, right, you need to have consciousness. Need to have mental. It's
Mhm.
abstract. It's not physical. Like when
Yeah.
we're thinking about these rules, you need a mind in order to do these operations.
Yes.
So I think that your naturalistic philosophy presupposes mind, right? It's the other way around for me.
Well, I don't think the naturalist or the physicalist would say that, would they? They would say the mind is just an emergent property. It just comes about. And many hard
Sure.
determinists would say it actually comes about. It's inconsequential. It's just a
Yeah, but where are you making the posit from?
what do you mean?
You can't where are you positing this from? From a mind, right? In order to even conceptualize, you need mind. And the fact that we have these conceptualizations lends proof, I think, to the fact that you have to have mind there in order to have naturalistic philosophy.
Oh, yes, that's true, but that's the epistemology of it, not the
Yeah,
ontology of it, right?
correct. But I mean, like that gives us a clue, right? Like, why is it that we need to presuppose that there weren't minds when for every time in human experience there have been mind, right?
Yeah, but I think the point, CoolDog, is a naturalist or a physicalist would say if there were no human beings, if there were no organisms on this planet, the planet still exists, right? That's their starting point, right?
Yeah, and I mean, like I'm not committed to that also not being a possibility. Like I can say that that's a possibility as well.
As an idealist.
Yeah, it would just be like there would be nobody to see the representations.
Right, okay. But okay, but there would still be some sort of cosmic mind, which is the underpinning of that
Yeah,
physical.
which is like the
Yeah.
universe itself.
Right, okay. Because I suppose the
Not
point I'm
super
getting.
it's not supernatural in the sense that there is a deity out there that is exerting causal forces, right?
Oh,
It's
yes. I'm not necessarily referring to a supernatural being, but what I'm referring to is something and some
yeah, within the
supernatural
universe, which
sort of
I mean,
cause or entity,
yeah,
right?
but the naturalist also asserts this.
No, I don't think they do they? They say there is no supernatural. They say everything is natural. Everything is physicalist.
Yeah,
That's their whole point, isn't it? The
right.
Big Bang Theory, the something from nothing, the multiverse theory, the Big Bang Theory, whichever way you go, they say it's all matter, it's all physical.
Yeah, but that's presupposing that there is some matter there, right?
Yeah?
I'm presuming that there is some mind stuff there.
No, that's their point. Their argument is there is no mind there. It's all physical. That's
Yeah,
what.
and my point is there is no physical, there's only mind there. It's exactly the same.
Yeah, exactly. No, I accept that. But then my point is, from your position there, then you have to explain what's the origin of that mind. So they will give you an origin for everything that they claim exists, right? What's the explanation for the origin of this mind that you're positing?
Oh, I just think time is infinite in both directions.
Right. Okay. But what's the origin of this mind, this ultimate essence to the
I mean,
to
there
the
is
universe?
no start, it's infinite.
Right. Okay. So okay, it's infinite. Okay. But the point is that it's still appealing to something which is non-naturalistic. Would you agree with that?
In the physicalist sense, yes.
Yes, in the physicalist sense. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So
Yes.
the physicalist would then argue, I presume, that if you're positing something which is non-naturalistic, how can you then conclude that the origin of anything is naturalistic? For example, how can you then claim 3.8 billion years ago that the first organism was created through naturalistic means, right? You could say that this supernatural cause may have created it spontaneously in a way which we don't understand.
Well, yes. I mean, that's a possibility, but on the other hand, like I still have rules of the way that mental stuff coheres into what we find to be a representation of it or like a sense experience of it. Like there's still rules that govern that under my system. And so those are the rules that make one thing change into another thing, right?
Yeah.
From
But the
itself, from mind.
yeah, but the sorry, carry on.
Yeah, so like there are rules that govern the way that physical stuff interacts with each other, right? And
Mhm.
from that interaction and that physical stuff itself, we see changes, right? I'm just doing
Yeah.
the same thing with mind. There are just rule. It's just the target is different.
Yeah, but I think the point is you can't ground those rules. So a physicalist can ground those rules and say they can ground them in the metaphysical presupposition that everything, occurs. Everything in this universe occurs through naturalistic processes. But I don't think the idealist can automatically assert that because they're automatically
Well,
presupposing that there is something beyond matter,
I I
right?
I'm gonna 100% agree with you that the physicalist, naturalistic, philosophical picture is coherent. Like it
Yes.
works.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I
So
will grant
Yeah,
that.
I agree. Yeah, I agree it's coherent as well. So I don't think there's anything inconsistent in a naturalist or a physicalist assuming that the universe came from nothing and
Evolution
abiogenesis.
yeah,
Yeah,
I completely agree with you. I think it's
yeah,
definitely coherent to hold that.
yeah.
However, like I think that my view is a little bit metaphysically cleaner, though, right?
Yes, I agree. I
Don't
agree. Yes.
have we don't have mediation. It's
Mhm,
like you're
mhm,
having to justify why this
mhm,
mediated through this emergent property subjective lens then
mhm.
goes on to give us these objective, like, truth propositions. For me, I don't need mediation.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I actually agree with you, Cool Dog, and I'm empathetic to idealism because I think it is a much more metaphysically clean worldview.
Yeah,
But the point is, right, when evolutionary theory emerged from Charles Darwin 160 years ago, he
sure.
built the theory on naturalistic philosophy. Because think about it, right? Nobody can possibly have an direct evidence for the origin of every single species and the origin of every single organism, right? So he had to presuppose physicalism or naturalism and say, look, everything has arisen through naturalistic means, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah,
an idealist, I don't think an idealist can make that assertion because they automatically presuppose that there is something beyond the natural,
right. So there's
right?
there's 2 things. There's 2 things to say. One, just because it comes from a certain presupposition doesn't mean it's not derivable from other presuppositions, right?
Mm.
2, right? In order to make these physicalist claims, he's coming with it the assertion that he's from a mind, that there is a mind positing this, right?
No, he would argue he's not, though, isn't it? A physicalist would argue they're not.
Yeah, but to assert that, you need some asserter.
Oh, right. Okay. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So he is an individual. That's subjective, isn't
Right.
it? Yeah. Yeah.
Right, like,
Okay.
he's got a subjective experience, and he has to presuppose that, right?
Yeah.
And the
Yeah. I
mind is
accept
from
that.
that.
Yes, so for the epistemology, I accept that. But you said you can come at this from different presuppositions. Yeah, so that I think is the crux of my argument,
Right,
right?
you can't.
So I don't think you can get to evolution with a different presupposition. That's the whole
I
argument.
mean,
So that's
I'm gonna try to lay out
yeah.
the case very simply, right? And how this is supposed to work in theory for the idealist, right? I
Mhm.
might be wrong, right? But okay, we have an infinite universe temporally, right?
Yeah.
This universe is constituted by mental stuff, okay?
Mhm.
That collection is called, we'll call it the universal mind or whatever,
Mhm.
that we're
Yeah.
all part of at some level, right?
Yeah.
Now, as time progresses, this block changes based
Yeah.
upon certain rules of mind, which we come to find out through our ability to think,
Mhm.
right? Which is the transcendental part, right? Our ability to
Mhm.
categorize all this Kant stuff, right? Kicks,
Yeah.
right? And so those rules govern the mental stuff. And so then we're running so when we say 500 million years ago or whatever, this was the state of the mental stuff, and we're
Yeah.
saying that 100 million years passes, things change based upon the rules of the mind.
Mhm.
And so these rules of mind, maybe not, there may be some different caveats with them because it is idealist, but can more or less, when we're talking about what you would call physical entities, right, they follow the same physics
Right. Okay. So that would be my contention. I mean, how can you assert that?
because they
Because you're
do,
sorry?
because they do, they work
Yeah,
that
but
way.
but what are you basing that on? Like, if you're a naturalist or a physicalist, I can understand where
What,
that
what
assertion
what
would
is
come
the
from.
physicalist basing this off of?
They're basing it on the premise, aren't they, that the axiom that everything follows that there is no supernatural, there are no miracles, there is no non-natural, so everything has to follow the laws of physics, right?
Yeah, but
Naturalistic
I
process.
but you see, my presupposition is just slightly different than that. This is everything follows the rules of mind.
Yeah, but we don't. What are the rules of mind? I mean, that's not something
I
which
mean,
physics.
we find them out by the bounds of our own thinking. What must we presuppose to have the thoughts that we do have? Or to have the sensory experience that we have? What rules do we have to presuppose for this particular array to happen?
Well, that's the point, isn't it? Yeah, exactly. So you can, for example, in a dream, you can create all sorts of
Yeah,
wonderful fantasies which defy the laws of
sure,
physics, right?
sure.
So, in the same way, if you're presupposing a cosmic mind, how can you eliminate the possibility that creation didn't come about through some kind of bizarre non-naturalistic process?
I mean, we can't, right? But I mean, but I mean, you're still operating in a presupposition, right? There's nothing about physicalism that necessarily precludes supernatural stuff,
No, there is a CoolDog. I think there is. I think the physicalist worldview.
except the bare assumption that there isn't.
Well, my whole argument is based on the fact that they do, right? So a physicalist will argue, right, that there is nothing non-natural, there is no
Yeah,
supernatural.
what's their justification for that?
Well, it boils down, yeah, obviously it boils down to a presuppositional axiom,
Yeah,
doesn't it?
so I do the same thing.
Which you disagree with.
So I just do the same thing. I just make a presuppositional axiom and do the same thing.
Yeah, but their presuppositional axiom, as we agreed, is consistent, right? Because
Yeah,
if
mine
they
is.
say only physical processes occur in this universe, then they
Yeah,
can say everything in this universe has a physical cause, right?
yeah. I mean,
So,
I haven't seen a miracle, but I
sorry?
have had hallucinations, right?
Yeah, true.
So,
Exactly.
so like, sure, there are cases where our senses don't report accurately or whatever. But I mean, as an idealist, I don't have to presume that there's this weird spontaneous causation that happens. I can presume opposite because that seems to be the regularity of mental experience.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I completely agree with you because you can apply methodological naturalism, I think, as an idealist. Yeah, I don't disagree with that, right? So when you're investigating, for example, something like a historical event, a crime scene, sure, you can apply methodological naturalism. You don't have to presuppose miracles and things like that,
Right.
right? Okay, but but I'm talking about the fundamental existential questions of life. How did this cosmos come to
Mhm.
being? How did the first organism come to being? How did the first species come into existence? Right, and for those questions, we can never have direct evidence. So you have to apply,
Right.
if you want to subscribe to evolution, you have to apply methodological naturalism to those. But I don't think the idealist can apply methodological naturalism to those questions because those are fundamental existential questions and you're automatically presupposing that there is a sort of cosmic mind. Therefore, how can you not rule out the cosmic mind creating those things spontaneously through non-naturalistic means?
I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that. But I mean, all that we're saying with any of these scientific or whatever is a big conditional statement, right?
Mhm.
Which is if these rules obtain, if these
Yeah.
are in fact the way that things are, then we will see such and such effect, right?
Yeah.
And I'm doing the same thing when I'm speculating about previous times in my idealist framework. I'm just saying, hey, let's presuppose that the rules are what they are and they haven't changed. What would have
Right.
happened back then at that time? That's all I'm doing. It's the same if then statement.
Yeah, yeah, I can understand that, but
I think it's coherent. I mean, again, I may be wrong about the idealism thing, but I think that I can still hold this. I don't know.
so you would, yeah, okay, but you're right. Okay, so you're saying there is a cosmic mind at the start, yet everything comes about, creation comes about through naturalistic physicalist processes, right? It has to. What you're saying, it has to come about through those means, right?
Not, I mean, not necessarily. Like, I'm sure that you're aware that like some of the universal constants can also change.
Mm,
It
right. I'm
could
not.
have been different. Could have been
Could have
different.
been different. Okay.
Could have
Yeah.
been different. Not
Yeah.
changed, but could have been different, right?
Yeah.
So you're
Okay.
committed to the same sort of situation as
Yeah.
well.
Well, I'm not actually a naturalist or physicalist myself,
Sure,
but I'm just
sure.
arguing for, yeah. But I don't think they are. That's the point. I think like like a typical Stephen Hawkins or a Lawrence Krauss or yeah, Brian Cox. I don't think they are committed to that view, and I think they would reject that view, that statement you've just made. Um,
I mean, fair
but,
enough. But I just think that like I don't know, like I just think that this is a system that could work, right? Maybe it's not the most appealing system, right?
mhm,
Maybe the convincing nature of it is not that high, but I
yeah.
think I still get from point A to point B coherently, right? I don't think I've contradicted.
Yeah. Well, no, I actually agree with you, Cool Dog. I think you can. It can exist. Don't get me wrong. So I think you can have right idealism and evolution, and the Big Bang Theory. I think you can, but what I'm arguing is I don't think the epistemology, I don't think the belief in those two systems is consistent, because I think by believing in those two, believing in evolution and believing in idealism, I think is making two. They have opposing presuppositional axioms. That's my point, right? So it could be true, but I think epistemologically it would be wrong to
See,
believe in those two.
so, like, if evolution, yeah, but I'm just questioning if the naturalistic presuppositions of evolution are necessary for us to hold that something that's basically evolution isn't true. Like, why are these presuppositions necessary
Yeah,
for evolution? What do they
I'll explain to you why they're necessary, right? Because this goes into probably a debate on evolution, right?
right?
Right. So, but there is no way that you can have direct evidence, right, for the origin of all
True.
species, right? This is an event which supposedly happened 3.8 billion years ago, right?
Right.
Similarly, today we've never seen, right? The evidence for speciation is very weak, right? Um, so yeah, we just don't have. We the only evidence we have is that organisms within a species, organisms within a species can reproduce with one another to create new organisms, right? But there
True.
is no convincing evidence that a species can give rise to another species through biological or naturalistic means, right?
Oh, I mean, I don't know enough about this, but I'll grant for sake of
Yeah.
argument.
Okay, thank you. So in order to assume that, right, in order to assume that your ancestor was a bacterium, right, you need to apply naturalistic philosophy, because it's a faith-based system. It's essentially a faith, right? Because
Sure.
there's no strong evidence for it. You can never have direct evidence for it, right? So
Sure.
in order to make that leap of faith, you need a metaphysical philosophy, right? And that is naturalism or physicalism, right? If you have idealism, I don't see why you would make that leap of faith. You don't have to, right? So you could just be
Yeah.
like, you
Right.
could
I
be
can
like
be
a theist
present.
and say I'm agnostic, right?
Okay, so
Um,
you're right. There are, like, I could run, instead of saying that the universe is infinite temporally, which I think I have to do to win
yeah,
this, right? If idealism is perfectly fine, and many people, oh, sorry, my mic fell over. And many people do hold to, like, a presentism, right? There is no past, there is no future,
yeah,
only the moment exists, right?
hmm hmm
And I think that in against that view, I think that you're 100% correct. I don't think
yeah,
you can hold that evolution happened and be a presentist like this without
yeah,
doing a bunch of mental you know, backflips and asserting some type of, like, supra narrative structure that connects each individual moment together, right? Like,
yeah,
I think that you're right about that, because then David Hume runs. But
yeah,
I think that, like, if we I mean, there's different variants of idealism.
hmm
So I think under my variant, I'm more than safe to assume that with when I say that the mental stuff persists, sort of self persists through time, right?
hmm
Like, I can make these presuppositions because I do have a time to look back on that I can conjecture about, even though we don't have direct access to, right? I can still
yeah,
conjecture about it because it's the same stuff all the way down as is now, is the idea.
yeah.
In my
So
view,
you want,
I can make these assumptions and use a methodology that is basically equivalent to naturalism or modern scientific method, or whatever methodology you want for investigating these.
hmm Yeah, so essentially what you're saying is, even as an idealist, you can apply methodological naturalism
Right.
to answer all the questions of the existential questions of life and the universe
Right.
and everything, right? Yeah, which to me just seems a little. I mean, perhaps you can, but I would ask the question, why would you? I mean, it just seems like you don't have to, right?
Yeah, yeah,
It
right,
makes sense
absolutely.
to me.
Like, I think that, yeah, there is a bigger leap of faith here, it seems, on the idealist end than on
Yeah,
the physicalist end. But
yeah,
on the other hand, I think when we're saying that if a belief is sensical, I
mhm.
think it's sensical in at least some sense of the word, right? Maybe
Mm,
not
mm.
completely, right? Maybe not in every definition of sensical where it's like the sensible thing to say is the most, like, epistemically justified thing, right? That
Yeah,
would be one definition of sensical. I may not win on that definition,
yeah.
but on a more minimal definition, I think I'm compatible.
Okay, so I see what you're saying is probably the physicalist has better reason to believe in evolution than the idealist, but
I
still
would
the
agree with
idealist,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay. But the
Like,
idealist can still make that connection. Okay, I mean, yeah, I think I understand what you're saying. It's just, for example, I suppose with idealism, I don't want to equate it to theism
sure.
necessarily, but obviously, as you're aware, isn't it, like a traditional Christian theist would probably argue, I don't need to explain the origin of species naturalistically. I can just presume a supernatural intelligence created them through some means I don't understand, right?
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
I mean, I
I
can
would
make that move if I want as well.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the idealist can make both claims, can't they? So they're sitting
Right,
on
I
the
can.
fence in a sense, whereas the naturalist is confined to only the naturalistic explanation through
Correct.
evolution, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I mean. So that's my point. I think for the idealist, it would be more sensible to remain agnostic because they've got two competing worldviews: creationism and evolution, and
Both are
their
fully
presupposition
compatible.
from axiom doesn't commit them to one or the cannot really make the connection to one or the other. It cannot prove it cannot justify one being more proven than the other.
Right. See, I guess I think I have to like bite the bullet there and then just say that my claim is much weaker than you probably think it is. Right?
Mm.
Like my claim is very, very weak in comparison. Right?
Yeah.
I'm just
Okay.
saying, hey, I've created a way of thinking that is coherent together that someone could take without having contradiction, that has evolution, a sense of like the essence of evolution in it with
Mhm.
idealism. And that's sensible to hold that, perhaps not appealing, but maybe it's not as epistemically warranted, or maybe
Yeah.
like the justification's a little bit weaker, but at least it's a coherent, compatible situation. That's all that I'm trying to
Right.
do. If the audience and you think that the word sensible is a much more robust notion of sensible than that, then I
Yeah.
will lose. Right? That's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah. So you're right. I suppose it comes down to our definition of nonsensical, doesn't it? And what
Right.
sort of the threshold is we consider.
Correct.
Yeah. So I would assert that you haven't met the threshold to call it sensical, but I suppose there is subjectivity involved in this, right? It's a bit arbitrary, and you
Yeah.
would argue you have, right? So I guess that's where we pretty much
Yeah, and
disagree.
I mean, this is just gonna be like you're gonna agree to your definition, and I'm gonna agree to mine, and then
Yeah.
I won't cede yours because if I cede yours, then I lose, right? And you
Yeah.
can't. That's just what it's. That's the field. Like,
Yeah. Fine. Okay. Well, I appreciate the discussion. I think it was very interesting. I
yeah,
mean, did you have anything else you wanted to say or add?
not really. I think we went through it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I appreciate that then. Thanks.
That was a good debate,
I'm
actually.
yeah, I'm happy to.